Very good morning, sir. Good morning, students who are witnessing this particular seminar from across India. We have close to 1,205 students, and a mix of faculty members also would be attending this particular power seminars from across India. Thank you very much, sir. Very good morning to all the participants, and very good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you for accepting to do the seminar, and I'm sure you've taken your time out of your busy schedule and you've joined us from Singapore. So good afternoon to you, and thank you very much. Very, very pertinent topic, and I had a pleasure of interacting with you a few days back, and that is when you indicated that you are doing a very powerful, master classes on survival or happiness. I felt it to be very, very relevant at the present context, especially we are in the testing times, and this kind of topics very pertinent to students, to the academic ecosystem as such. So thank you very much for joining today morning for this particular session, sir. I will give you a brief introduction. I'm sure I have it in front of me. Mr. Satinder Singh Rekhi is a Chief Executive Officer of our system, a software product engineering and a listed company in India. He has close to 25 global offices with some 3,000 plus employees across the globe. It is a US dollar 118 million organization, and I think I'm sure you are a potential recruiter of our students as well. So Mr. Satinder has graduated from prestigious IIT Kharagpur, India, with a bachelor's degree in technology. He also possesses an MBA degree from the California State University, USA, and has attended several leadership programs from the University of Berkeley and Harvard Business School. I'm not going to read out his full profile because the very beginning of his profile itself shows his expertise and and he also ran a Center of Excellence in IIT Kharagpur, this alma mater, on the same Center for Happiness. So thank you very much, sir, once again for joining us, and I leave the floor to you to inspire and create a positive impact among the students. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you very much for that great introduction. I'm definitely a recruiter, but I recruit happy students, happy people. So having said that, I want to start my presentation, and I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Just give me one moment. So are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about happiness or survival. And I'm hoping that after my presentation, you will be a little happier, if not a lot happier. The brain wants you to survive. The brain is not particularly interested in you being happy. And brain gets you scared so that you survive. So let me get over some of the fundamentals first. What is happiness? Happiness is a journey. It's not a destination. It's a journey, and it's getting good feelings moment by moment. That's important to know. It's not like a fixed deposit, a lottery which you get, and then you will be happy for the rest of your life. It is a moment by moment trying to work with your positive feelings and trying to manage your negative feelings. Survival is continuing to live and exist, and the brain is interested in you passing your genes on to the next generation. So let me talk a little bit about the mind. The mind is anti-fragile. What does that mean? A glass is fragile. When I put pressure on a glass, it breaks. When I put pressure on the mind, stress on the mind, it becomes better. The mind needs adversity and challenges to thrive. It's like a rock that becomes a diamond under pressure. It's like your immune system, which strengthens after repeated exposure to germs. Now, if the mind does not have challenges, if it does not have some stress, then it creates its own problems and challenges, and then you are fighting yourself. which is very hard. Fighting your own self is very hard. It's better to fight an external challenge. Then I want to talk to you about the law of duality. In life, most things come in twos. And these twos are opposites of the same thing. Long, short, tall, short, beautiful, ugly, good or bad. So life comes in these opposites because the brain needs opposites to make a judgment. For example, if you were the only person on earth, there was nobody else, would you be tall or short? Would you be good or bad? Would you probably be happy or unhappy? Would you be positive or not positive? So brain cannot think absolutely. Opposites make experience possible. To experience A, we need to experience not A. So to experience happiness, we need to have experienced unhappiness. So I'm going to talk to you about the science of happiness. I'm going to talk to you about the science of unhappiness and the brain's tendency to get you scared and stress you so that you survive. Then I'll talk to you about how the brain compares and how we make our ego and how we have an inner critic and which makes us unhappy. So all through this in the next 30, 45 minutes, that's what I want to cover. So back to this law of duality, the brain needs an opposite to think and make a judgment. So if I need to experience, as I said, happiness, I needed to have experienced unhappiness. So happiness and unhappiness are complementary because without the one, the other cannot be experienced. It's like the two wings of an eagle. So while we are thankful for our positive emotions and we are thankful for our happiness, we need to also understand that we need to be thankful for our negative emotions and our unhappiness, because without which the experience of happiness is not possible. While we have to cultivate positive emotions and we have to compassionately observe and manage negative emotions, but they are all complementary. An important question I want to ask you is happiness, and I've kind of referred to it, is happiness a priority for your brain? Does your brain want you to be happy? Probably not. I'll give you an example. In a day, you have 6 events. Out of those 6 events, 4 are positive events, some accomplishments, some achievements, great things that you've done. 1 is a neutral event, and 1 is an insult and embarrassment, humiliation, and a negative event. That's 1 event. And 4 positive and 1 neutral. At the end of the day, nighttime, which thought will you have? If you're more like most people, you will have the negative thought. That is because the brain hangs on to negativity because that the brain thinks is a threat to you and is a threat to your survival. So it holds on to the negativity. For the brain, survival is a priority. And as I said, survival is assured by making you afraid and scared. And why is this? How did this happen? So when we lived in the caves, that is the time evolution took place. And the priority when we lived in caves was to get food. I want to get my lunch, and I don't want to become lunch of somebody else. That was all my aim. As I got up in the morning, I was looking for food. So caveman A comes out of his cave and he meets a bear, a big tiger, a big cat or a big cat. The brain sends chemicals, negative chemicals, which makes the caveman A scared and fearful. And caveman A either can fight the cat, the tiger, or run. He decides to run, hoping that he will escape. And let's assume he escapes. Caveman B again comes out of the cave and he sees the tiger, the bear, or whatever animal, but he does not get a fear response. He gets a love response, a friendly response. Now my question to you is, who is your ancestor? Caveman A. So we are the elite descendants of the stressed, fearful, scary ancestor. And that fear and stress and being scared is hardwired into our brain. And that is survival. That is number one priority of our brain. And the brain has done good. We have survived so many years. So we see now negativity, insult as a threat. And our brain is primed to look for these threats and send those negative chemicals which make you feel scared. And that it does through what we call the stress response system. The stress response system is when the brain perceives a threat, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, which sends out chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, and you get the fight, flight, or freeze response. Either you can fight, or you can run away, or you freeze. Freezing because you believe if you freeze, the animal may think that you are dead and will let you off. So that's how we are involved. So I'm trying to explain that fear is hardwired into our brain. So the brain continues to create stress for us because it wants you to survive. But today, in today's world, there are no animals roaming around. There are no tigers and leopards. So those threats that were there in the wild when we lived is now been replaced by what is called social and emotional stress. Fighting with your spouse, examinations, finding a job, caught in a traffic jam, misbehavior by your kid. All of those have replaced the physical dangers, and the brain has not evolved much more, and it just sends the same response system of those negative chemicals, which we got over by running a physical response. We gave it and we ran and fought. But today, we cannot do that to the social stresses that we get, and these chemicals build in us, and if we don't know how to handle them, then they attack one of our organs. That's the way biology is. So stress today is purely social. There's some physical stress also, of course, but largely it's social pains of humiliation, fear, shame, rejection, guilt, and all of that. And the brain sends out those chemicals which actually send you into a panic mode. And that's what is called anxiety. That's what is called panic and worry. So we can make, because of this living in the wild, there are two mistakes that we are constantly worried about. Mistake one, believing there's a tiger in the bush, but there's no tiger. Mistake two, believing there is no tiger, but there is a tiger. Of course, there are no tigers here, but the threats that the brain continues to make, and it wants to make mistake two, believing there's no tiger. It believes that there's a tiger most of the time and warns you and alarms you that you do not take that risk of taking the next step. It does not want you to make a mistake where there's a tiger in the bush and when you believe there's no tiger. And for that reason, we actually land up not going after many opportunities and just sit back. So our life revolves around these two mistakes, and we want to make sure that we don't make the fatal mistake that believing there's no tiger, but there's a tiger. And for that, we lose many opportunities. So having said that, now I want to discuss, is it possible to get happier? Can scientists and all this research on happiness make us happier? So I'll take the pessimistic view first. There's a theory which is called the set point theory of happiness, which says that the happiness is controlled by a set point, which is genetically determined and that rarely changes. We are born with that set point of happiness, and when good things happen, we go up. When bad things happen, we come down, but we navigate to that set level. So truly, you cannot do much. That's what some people say. So an example is given of two cases. One case, a person gets a lottery. He's very happy. His happiness index is very high. And second, a person gets a jail. His happiness index is very low. But 3 months or 6 months later, when you go back to them, they have actually come back to that set level of happiness. The lottery guy has come back lower down from where he was, and the jail person goes up, because the jail person adjusts to new conditions, and the lottery person realizes that there are many other issues involved, income tax and people coming after him for sharing his money, or for whatever reasons, it comes down to the set level. So now the question is, can we raise the set level itself? The other thing which is said is that in happiness, hedonic adaptation takes place. Hedonic adaptation is a technical fancy word for saying we get used to things. I desire a car. I desire a house. And I believe that when I get it, I'll be so happy. But what happens is when I get it, after a few months or so much time, it is not as happy given. I get used to it. So we are constantly trying to get things, and we get a little happy, but we get back to the same point. So happiness stays at a stable level, and despite many positive or even negative events. So my question then is, can we raise that set point again? Can we get off the treadmill? So now let me talk. Happiness is a choice, and we can improve our happiness state. And the Buddhists talk about the two arrows, and the two arrows are that anytime we suffer misfortune, two arrows fly our way. In life, it is true that pain is inevitable. All of us will experience pain, physical pain, emotional pain, losses, rejection, defeats, shame, and they all will hurt. They pierce your heart. That is the first arrow, on which you have no control. The first arrow of misfortune hits you, that is pain. On that you have no control. But the second arrow, you have control. And the second arrow is something you shoot your own self. What it means is, and that's optional, the second arrow represents your reaction to the bad event. It's the manner in which we choose to respond emotionally. So don't shoot that second arrow. I will explain this by a few examples. I'm an engineer, but I'm not a good handyman. My wife asked me to hang a painting, and every time I try to hammer a nail into the wall, I hammered my thumb. So when I hammer my thumb, that's physical pain. Definitely it's pain. But subsequently, what I do is, I tell myself, what kind of an engineer are you? You can't even hammer a nail? And I keep on telling that myself again and again. So that means that I keep firing the second arrow on myself again and again. So pain is inevitable. Suffering is what I create. Of course, on a lighter sense, now my wife does not ask me to hang a painting. Let's give you another example. You go into a bank. There are 50 people in the bank. As soon as you walk into the bank, a robber arrives. He fires a gun, and you get shot in your arm. There are many ways, and there are 50 other people, only you get shot. There are many ways at the end of the day you can tell yourself a story. I think you're getting the point. It is the stories that we tell ourselves which make our pain reduce or make our pain become suffering. So a story could be that there are 50 people. Why do I get shot? I get shot all the time. Every time I am the person who's singled out. You'll feel unhappy. Or you could create a happy story. I got shot only in my arm. I could have been shot in my head. And if you want to be a little noble, other people did not get shot. I took it. So here what is happening is, I want you to spend a little time here. I am creating two imaginary facts. I am creating two imaginary stories. One is that why do I get shot? And two is that I got shot on my arm. And the brain compares the present situation with these imaginary facts. So if you are to create these facts, if you have to create the stories, create good stories. Because the brain, as I told you, needs to compare. And if you give them a story that I'm so lucky and I feel so grateful that I did not lose my life, the brain will send out positive chemicals and you'll feel happy. Let me give you another example. Gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal. Who do you think is the unhappiest? Some people may say bronze medal, but bronze medal the guy does not. Research shows bronze medal person does not become the unhappiest. The gold medal, of course, is happiest because he got the gold. It's the silver medal. The silver medalist creates a story. I was so close to the gold medal. Gold is gold. Silver is silver. It was an opportunity I lost. I should have got that gold. The bronze medalist says, I am so lucky I got at least bronze. I would have been 4 or 5 and not be in the reckoning at all. So once again, the brain needs a story to compare with. And you have the option to create that story. And that is the second arrow. That second arrow that you will shoot will reduce your pain or will make the pain suffering. Final example, you get an F in one class, one course. You can create a story that my life has come to an end, I'll never graduate, or you can make an optimistic story saying that this is one class and I will work hard and get it over with, and I've done well in other courses. So the lesson to learn here is that between pain and suffering, there is space. And that space is your choice to choose happiness or suffering. That space is your choice to let go of that baggage. And the pain will reduce and you'll feel a little happier. Another secret for unhappiness is what I call the mind wandering, time traveling. We have an adversity, some misfortune, some bad event in the present moment. Say, for example, I've lost a friend. I go to the past and think of some amount we will do, but if we do it all the time, then it's a problem. I go to the past and think of the great times that I had with my friend, and I keep ruminating on that. Or I travel to the future and think how my life would have been with that friend. Both of these are imaginary situations today. The only real situation is the present and the adversity. If you will compare the present situation with the past good and the future imagined good, which I call time travel, you will be unhappy. Our brain is always comparing. I've mentioned that to you. And why does it compare? It is because of an ego that I create for myself. What is ego? Ego is my story. It's my documentary. It's a story I tell myself who I am. It determines, in my mind, what my self-worth is. And how do I do that? I create an identity through various things. I build an ego by getting possessions, more and more possessions, getting a car, getting a house. That's my identity. Then my title in my job, the kind of education I've had, the kind of profession I hold, my physical experience, my accomplishments, all these become a part of my identity. Identity means something which is inseparable from you. It says something about me. It says something about my self-worth. That is where the problem is. Because I have no problem if people have a good car, people have a good house, and they have accomplishments. But if they believe that these things are what they are, and they determine my self-worth, then the challenge is somebody else gets a better car or bigger car, my ego is hurt. Because remember, The brain is always comparing. And if I created an identity, then identity which is linked to my car, my house, and somebody else has something better, then I feel smaller. There are 2 or 3 big problems with the ego. Ego lives through comparison. It's always comparing with the other person. And unfortunately, when I do this comparison, I come out not good enough, not worthy enough, not thin enough, not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not intelligent enough. And then negative emotions of fear, jealousy. Jealousy is, he has something, I want that. Envy also comes in. Envy is, he has something, I don't have it, I wish he also does not have it. Then shame. Shame is where I feel I'm flawed. In ego, I feel so short, I feel flawed, and I want to hide myself. And then guilt also comes in. Guilt is, of course, similar to shame, except I want to repair the damage done. The other thing which ego does, it is always wanting more and more. Because my identity and my self-worth is based upon what things I get and what things I have, I'm always going to ask for more and more things. And the challenge with that is, then ego becomes future happiness. When I get that car or house or job, I will be happier. So it's always in the future. So you never feel complete. It's future happiness and not present happiness. And then one keeps on going and going, but not finding the happiness at all. I feel insufficient. I feel short, a lack. The other thing which the ego does is it creates an inner critic. Because of its comparison and I'm falling short, there's an inner voice which tells me I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. And paradoxically, the inner critic, which is a criticizer, is also my ego. And the criticized is also me, the ego. So the criticizer and the criticized both are my ego, and they bash me up internally. The inner critic also develops because of harsh parents who continuously give their kids a hard time, teachers, coaches, bullies in school who tell you you're no good, you're not smart enough, and that registers inside you. I've met some people who say, I don't hear inner critic voice. If you don't hear your inner critic voice, then you have to raise the volume, because you'll be doing many things which are being commanded by the inner critic and you don't hear the voice. Some people overhear the voice. The voice is just too loud. They need to reduce the volume. But the inner critic is there with all of us. And that gives us a very hard time. It's a secret for unhappiness. I'm coming close to my presentation and I'm going to tell you a story. The story is about the eagle who thought she was chicken. Once upon a time, there was an eagle who laid some eggs. There was a storm, and the eagle got flown away, and the eggs rolled down into a chicken farm. It got mixed with the chicken eggs, and the chicken laid the chicken eggs and the eagle egg. An eaglet was born. The eaglet was born amongst these chickens, and she thought she was chicken. She tried to please the chicken by trying to be a good chicken, but of course, she was an eagle. She never could be a good chicken and was ridiculed by all the chickens. She felt sad. And she tried to do all the things chickens do, trying to look for food on earth. Eagle beak is different than the chicken beak. Very difficult for her to dig out insects from the ground. The chickens made fun of her. She continued to live unhappily in the chicken house along with the chickens, thinking she was a bad chicken. One day she looked up into the skies and saw some eagles, and she said to the chicken, her friend chickens, "I wish I was an eagle." The chickens laughed at her. They laughed at the eaglet. They said, "You're so dumb. You're a loser. You're so stupid." These are things the eaglet heard again and again, of course. And the eaglet had a very harsh inner critic that told him that you're not good enough, you're not a good chicken, you're not smart enough. And she lived in shame. One day, the chicken and the eagle were roaming around in the grass, doing the chicken things, and a big eagle flew across the sky. The big eagle saw this little eaglet amongst the chickens, and she wondered what this eaglet is doing with these chickens. She flew down and landed there. As soon as she landed there, all the chickens rushed into the chicken house. But the eaglet was kind of trapped on the other side. And the big eagle was now in between the chicken house and the eaglet who thought she was chicken. The chicken in the chicken house started screaming to the eagle, saying, "Come, run back to the chicken house." The big eagle looked at the eaglet and said, "What are you doing here amongst all these chickens? You are an eagle." The eaglet was surprised. He said, "I'm an eagle?" "Yes, you're an eagle." The chicken from the chicken house shouted at the eaglet, said, "Don't believe this, ye big eagle. She will hurt you." So the eaglet thought of a plan. She talked to the big eagle, said, "If I'm an eagle and you're an eagle, then you won't hurt me." The big eagle said, "Yes, I'm not going to hurt you. All I want you to do is to walk to the end of the cliff and then jump." The eaglet was just too scared to do that. She thought of a plan, the eaglet. She said, "If you're the eagle and I'm an eagle, you're not going to hurt me. Why don't you move aside?" In her mind, the eaglet's mind, it was that once the big eagle moves away, she'll rush into the chicken house. The big eagle said, "Yes, I will move, but I want you to still try and go to the cliff." So the big eagle moved away. Now the eaglet could rush to the chicken house or go to the cliff, as the big eagle wanted the eaglet to do. In psychology, they always tell you stories and ask you to complete the story. If you were in the eaglet's position, what would you do? Would you rush into the chicken house, or would you walk to the cliff? The big eagle said, "Just go to the cliff and look down." And while this was going on, from the chicken house, voices were coming from the chickens to the eagle, "You're a loser. Come back to the chicken house. You will die. You're not an eagle. You won't be able to fly. You're good for nothing. You're an idiot. Our eaglet decided to walk towards the cliff. Said, let me walk towards the cliff. As she started walking towards the cliff, she was distant from the chicken house. So the voices from the chicken house that you're dumb, you're no good, stopped. She couldn't hear them anymore. But to her surprise, the same voices were coming from inside her. Now the inner critic was after her in full volume. Go back to the chicken house. You're a loser. You'll die. Don't trust this big eagle. You're so dumb. This was her own inner critic inside her telling her not to make a fatal mistake. Go back and live like chicken. What did our eaglet do? She stood at the cliff, looked down. There was a lot of fear. She was scared. She tried to stretch her wings. There was hardly much strength. A blast of wind came. And she felt strength in her wings. She jumped. She flew. She left all the chickens behind. She left behind all the shameful negative thoughts. She soared the skies. It was a moment for her. She refused to live like a chicken. All of you are born eagles. Don't be chicken. Y'all are all meant to soar the skies. Summarizing. Happiness and unhappiness are complementary. If you don't have unhappiness, experience of happiness is not possible. There are two wings of an eagle. Happiness is a choice. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. There is a pause between pain and suffering. If you react too fast, it becomes suffering and you carry the load. If you pause, you can make it less pain and even happiness. Don't time travel. When you time travel to the past and time travel to the future, you'll be unhappy. Stay in the present moment. Ego lives in comparison. It's always wanting more and more. It's never satisfied. There is an inner critic. Like my eaglet, she was able to silence the inner harsh critic. This inner harsh critic takes away all your confidence. It takes away all your happiness. We need a small one, but generally I've seen most people have a very high volume inner harsh critic. Some people talk of being perfectionist. All of that, I want you to silence. And lastly, remember, if this one point you remember, my presentation has been worth it. You're born an eagle. Don't be chicken. You're meant to soar the skies. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And if there are questions, I'll be very happy to answer.
Thank you very much, sir. Can you switch on your camera, please?
So now how do I do it? Yes. I'm
Yeah,
back.
I can see it. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for enlightening all of us with your wonderful speech. A lot of pointers and a very, very interesting story to conclude. There are at least some 2,435 eagles who are attending this particular webinar with me. And I think the one factor, out of all your pointers, one aspect which I liked the most was between the pain and the suffering, there is a space. How to handle that particular space is definitely a challenging thing, because I also, after seeing that particular point, I also am trying to understand how should I do that. So as a practitioner, as a preacher of the science of happiness, do you have any tips for us to help us handle that real space? It is very easy. It is easily said than to practice it. So as an expert, do you have any concrete methodology to handle that space with ease?
Suresh Babu, you asked a very good question. And the fact that you're asking this question shows that you are on that path. In science of happiness, what we accomplish is that we make the brain aware. Once the brain is aware, then it finds the path. Human beings are the only species that can observe itself. The animals probably cannot observe itself. We can observe our thoughts. We can observe our feelings. We can observe that we're getting angry. So if you get into the observer mode, where you're observing what is happening, then you'll be able to spot that empty space, the pause space. What happens is we are in auto mode. We keep running up and down. Something happens. We are angry. We are chasing. But once you start observing yourself, you will be able to handle it. The brain does it for you. The moment you're able to say, Suresh Babu, I think you need to pause before you take this decision. Pause will happen. And it's a practice. The thing is, happiness and unhappiness, if you practice unhappiness, you become good at unhappiness. You practice happiness, you become good at happiness. Just like you practice badminton, you become good at badminton. Similarly here, so you practice observing your thoughts, observing your own self. And that observer self, which observes you and your ego and all of this, that will solve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Practice always makes a man perfect. And I've read several articles which said that the brain can be calibrated. Brain can definitely be calibrated, and it can be brought into control. So I now got the points. I will take up.
I just want to say, you said something very important. I can't resist. Our brain is neuroplastic, which means unlike iron, it can be changed. So it will be calibrated. It can be changed. So once it gets aware of itself, then it changes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll just take a few questions from the chats. One of the question from Shubham. Sir, among these three, fight, freeze, and fight, which type of personality has more success rate? You want me to repeat it, sir? Okay.
Yes, no, Shubham, it's the same thing. Like, for instance, I coach sports people also. Sometimes when they get, when they play in practice, they do a very good job. When they go into the court in a tournament, in competitive sports, there's pressure of winning. They freeze at that time. They can't fight. They can't run away. They freeze. And then they make mistakes. So the brain chooses one of these three, fight, flight, or freeze. You probably cannot do it yourself. It is automated. But I think none of them are better than each other. All of them fall in the same category.
Absolutely.
That's for Shubham.
And one more question from Tanmay Kohli. Isn't it better to accept the fact that we are not perfect than to think we are all going to fly?
Mr. Kohli, absolutely. The biggest problem is that when we think that we are perfect, then our harsh inner critic gives us a very hard time. We are human. Human beings make mistakes. People who make mistakes learn. So we don't need to bash ourselves for mistakes. And I agree with you. We are not perfect, and we should not desire to be perfect. One of the miseries of, one of the unhappiness reasons is that we want to be perfect. And perfection is actually an illusion.
And there is one more question from Divyanshu. How to deal with that inner voice? I'm my biggest critic sometimes.
Divanshu, I want you to try and listen to the voice. And when I've worked with some people, they have been able to recognize that voice. And sometimes they're able to recognize that voice as to coming from a parent, a grandparent, or a coach, or a teacher. They are able to see that that voice is stuck in them. So hearing that voice and then observing that voice would help. And then trying to lower the volume of the voice. Unfortunately, we are not self-compassionate. We can be compassionate to other people, but when it comes to our own selves, we are not compassionate ourselves.
Absolutely.
So look at your things with some compassion, self-compassion. That will help.
Yeah.
And recognize that the inner voice is probably coming from somebody. I found people are able to recognize that voice. It's my mother who used to keep giving me such a hard time. I hear her voice. Parents do mean well. I mean, they mean well. I don't want to discredit them. They mean well, and they want you to perform extraordinarily well. But sometimes their voice becomes very harsh to the kid, and who mistakes it as saying that I get conditional love, meaning that if I get A grade, I will be loved. If I get an F grade, I won't be loved. So that's a very big challenge.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions which are flowing. By the way, I will just compile it and I will drop us a mail to you, sir. We just have another 9 more minutes left. So I'll ask 2 important questions before you leave, because getting you itself is a very, very difficult task. So it is my personal question, like the science of happiness. Today, I could see many universities like Berkeley, your own University of Berkeley, and so many University of California. Many are having that as an allied subject. So, of course, happiness is definitely a science. So, can you suggest us 3 books which will help us to better understand? Because many questions are very pertinent to how to do it. Probably this limited time of yours might not make them understand how to really practice it. Probably you can suggest some 2 or 3 books which will actually help us to better ourselves in terms of handling the stress and anxiety and be even more happy in our regular routine.
There are lots of books. Martin Seligman, who is considered the father of positive psychology from Pennsylvania, he has some books. One can look at that. Martin Seligman. And then there's Dan Gilbert. He's also a very good author on books on happiness. You can look at that. And if you Google happiness books, there are so many of them. But these 2 authors are generally well respected. Martin Seligman and Dan Gilbert.
Thank you. That's good suggestions. My second question to you is the Center of Excellence for Science of Happiness in IIT Kharagpur. What actually triggered the very idea of setting up a Center for Science of? Is there any personal story behind it which triggered you to do that?
Thank you, Suresh Babu, for asking me that question. I've learned that some ideas come to my mind, and how and where they come from, I don't know. And I've also learned that when I pursue those ideas, they turn out to be very good. And if I analyze and paralyze those ideas, then I don't go forward. So I got this idea that I need to give back to my alma mater, IIT Kharagpur, and I want them to do research and studies in science of happiness. I pursued that, talked to the director. He was very receptive. And so I did it. And it's a very great idea because it's a very popular course. And I believe that, if an engineer graduates from a technical institute and he has a micro specialization in science of happiness, his employability will be very high. Absolutely. If he comes for an interview to you, Suresh Babu, you will ask him, oh, you've done electrical engineering and you've also done science of happiness. Tell me why happiness will help you. And that person will say, I'll make you happy, sir. I'll make your company happy. And he will. And I will make your customers happy. And he will. So his job prospects will be very much higher. And remember, anything that you do unhappily, you will manage to do it better happily. So even in my organization, I find some technical guys, if they're happier, they do a much, much better job.
Absolutely. Happiness is the foundation for all. I cannot resist from asking this last concluding question. So many questions are flowing, but still, one more question from Shubham. I don't know, Shubham, if you can represent yourself, your college name and the location. Meanwhile, I will also read out the question for you, sir. How to separate time travel from our goals? Because sometimes future time travel gives us the dream of life. So this is the question from Shubham.
Shubham, you're asking good questions. Yes, goals are important, so we need to time travel. But goals, obsessive focus on goals is what I want you to avoid. Goals will provide you motivation. Goals will provide you direction. But you have to come back to the present moment, because goals is an outcome which is not in your control. What is in your control is the action you can take. So after having defined the goal, come back to the action steps that you can take. Focus on those. And that way you'll be happier and you'll reach your goals faster. You'll be surprised. Even in the sports, if you get into the court with the obsessive focus on goals and winnings and expectations, you never win. If you go with the expectation of just playing well, you will be surprised that the medal reaches you. So your goal will reach you if you focus on what actions you can take, rather than obsessively focusing on those goals.
Okay, got it. So Shubham is from Shivali College of Engineering, Dehradun. He has just sent me a private chat. Sir, thank you very much, sir. At a very short notice, the moment we understood that you ran a program on science of happiness and it is a passionate area, we requested you, and immediately, without even the second thought, you accepted to do this session and enlighten all of us. We expected 1,000 students today. Right now, we have close to 2,219. I'm sure the maximum we had some 2,500 odd students who participated in this particular webinar from across the nation. Thank you very much for doing this, and we will keep taking your expertise. We will keep troubling you for more such session, not just for the students, but also the faculty fraternity of the colleges whom we work with.
Suresh Babu, I want to commend you. You are doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
You are doing a wonderful job. I can congratulate you. And I can assure you, when you do the job that you're doing, you'll be happy yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure having you in this platform. And we hope to see many more such sessions from you to reach larger audience. As I said, one for the academic administrators, one for the teaching fraternity, and a similar program for the students as well. Thank you very much once again, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. And I want to thank each one of the participants for giving their time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.